So I've got a PowerPoint here that I can go through. This one is going to be similar to the last one. The only difference is I have an extra video in this one, and I want to make sure that I get some time to do more of the video because I want to do more examples during this workshop. But most of you know who I am already. And is there anybody here who did not see me at all that has no idea why they're in this room? No? Anybody?
Sue,
Okay.
be proud. Raise your hand. There you go.
Sorry, I drove from Big Sur.
Good. So I'm not going to focus too much on me. I'm going to focus on the concepts. So the goal of the workshop will be to teach participants an approach to earning instructional control with unmotivated or otherwise challenging learners that does not employ the traditional escape extinction. So raise your hands if in your teaching or in your programs that either you run or that someone runs for you, there's a lot of hand-over-hand or escape extinction in that they're blocking your child's attempts to escape the teaching setting. Okay, so it's at least half, maybe a little bit more than half. The one thing I want to make sure is clear to everyone, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. Okay, this is in our science, it's been studied. We know that it can be effective to use escape extinction. However, my point that I try to make is that I find it to be more on the restrictive side of the continuum of interacting. And so a good behavior analyst is going to do everything they can to engage a child in a way where they're going to minimize the need to use this type of engagement. We don't want to have to use escape extinction. That's why Western Michigan University was so pivotal in bringing the concepts of verbal behavior into the ABA field. And this idea of the motivating operations is that the ability to increase the value of a teaching setting allows you to decrease yourself as an aversive. Decrease the teaching setting as an aversive, decrease yourself as an aversive. This is crucial. Without this, we find teaching being a captive exercise. And if you look back at a lot of the early Lovas videos, it was a captive exercise. The teachers, you were taught to strap your legs around the legs of the child's chair, not allowing them to get out. The difference between that and actually having a child strapped into like a Rifkin chair is very small. And in a lot of the environments in which behavior analysts are asked to work, the ability to do some of these things that incorporate captive learning is just not allowed. You're not allowed to physically hold a child into teaching settings in a lot of settings. And so when that's the case, you find that you either you have this extinction procedure, this escape extinction procedure that we know can work, but we're often being told we can't use it. Or if we can use it, we're finding that the people who are doing the implementation day in and day out are not willing to do it or not able to do it effectively, consistently, without losing their own desire, their own motivation to continue teaching. So there's some real benefit in trying to find an alternative approach to this. And that's really something that I've been focused on, like I mentioned in my earlier talk. It's been something I've focused on for the last 10, 12 years. And in 2006 is when I first published the first edition of my book. That's when I first started presenting it to people and bringing it out and letting people know that this is what we've been working on, this is what we've been doing, and this is how and why it's been successful. But it has since grown, and we've been able to develop a lot of techniques within this process to help us to be successful with more children. So what I want to make sure I do during this session is I want to take some questions from you. For those of you who said, oh, you know what, I heard what you were saying earlier, sounds cool, I'd love to be able to do it, or I've tried this sort of thing in the past, but here's the problems I had. Why it didn't work because of this. And I'd like to maybe answer some of those questions for you here, just to give you a better idea of how you may be able to apply this. Again, realize that there needs to be more research done, there needs to be more study done on this concept. There's nothing in the 7 steps that are not based on, that are not consistent with behavioral principles. However, using them as a packaged system and doing that weight out portion, there's not enough research on that for me to be able to say to you that this is a recommended approach, that this is best practices. It's not. We don't have that research yet. Having said that, I do use it. And I do use it because the data that we've seen clinically has been extraordinary. And for us, it's been far superior, both in what we prefer to do and in the result. And so if what you're doing seems to have a better result in the data, at least for certain types of kids, and you feel better doing it, you can do it more comprehensively without having to deal with issues of your own feelings, I think you're in a position where teachers and parents and others are going to be able to follow it, and are going to follow it with better consistency. And so that's what we want to make sure that we do. So, again, there's my book, you guys. It's downstairs if there's any left. And then this is the other book. This is the one that we didn't talk about. This is 7 Steps of Instructional Control. This one's more, how many of you guys are providers or behavioral professionals? Okay, a larger group in here. I understand that we had a lot more parents in the other group. And so I didn't really talk about this, but this is the book where we focus in solely on the 7 Steps to Instructional Control. And it goes beyond just how do we do it, what it looks like, but it also has some ways of being able to teach it to others to do it, and then ways to check their validity of how well they're doing it. So, the objectives. Describe the importance of learner assent in home, clinic, and education settings. I talk about assent. We talk about consent a lot in our field. You know, you want to make sure you've got written consent from families to work with the child, but we don't really talk about assent very much. A child who doesn't speak can still offer his assent. That's a willing participation. He can show you that he's willingly participating in something. And if we can get assent in our educational practices, I would think most people would argue that that's a better way to go if we can get assent. Now, obviously, we can't always count on that. We're going to have to do things. You know, if I relied on assent for everything, my daughter would sit in front of the TV eating Cheetos all day long. We know that. But if I can work in a way that allows me to get assent from a child, as well as allows me to get better approved consent from the family, I think we're in better shape. We want to employ creative and practical methods for controlling access to reinforcement in all environments. Describe the value and process of being meticulously contingent in words and actions. Describe the differences between positive and negative reinforcement. Again, with this group, I don't think I have to do too much of that, but we'll touch on it. Describe the concept of the teaching art, and that is if we have time at the end. I don't know if we'll have time for that today, but that's a topic I may just broach, and then you guys can look it up further if you want to look into the books. We know what instructional control is. When I go in to see a family for the first time, or I go into a classroom for the first time, I promise you a large percentage of the time we're looking at 5% instructional control or worse. These are kids who are throwing aside 95% of the instructions that they're getting on a regular basis. Even kids who are in programs, ABA programs, where they're doing good ABA, you're still seeing a lot of, if you count every instruction given to the child, and then you compare that to every response that the child is giving, you're still seeing a very low percentage of those instructions being followed. And a lot of that has to do with the time you spent in escape extinction, repeating your instruction over and over again. We want to make sure that a child learns that it's in their best interest to respond to every instruction. Okay? So how do we make it in their best interest? Well, we have to play with the variables within the environment to make sure that the reinforcement available for participating, for following the instruction, or answering the SD. We have to make sure that that reinforcement is more valuable or more effective in that setting environment than any other reinforcement that might be available to them. And again, when we talk about escape extinction, these are really the things we're talking about. Is there anybody who has something else in their mind when they talk about escape extinction? Can anybody give me a description of something they do in escape extinction other than blocking the child's attempts to escape, forced physically prompting, or paced prompting, repeating the instruction over and over? Okay, good. So we're talking about the right thing. This is what you guys think of as escape extinction, correct? Some form or balance of these three things. Does anybody argue with what I said in the last presentation, that truly only forced physical prompting is escape extinction? Unless I have a misunderstanding of the principle, blocking a child's attempt to escape, yet not allowing them, but not actually getting them to do the skill, is still not really truly escape extinction. They're still escaping the behavior. They're not escaping the teaching setting, but they're escaping the behavior for at least a period of time. Same thing with paced prompting. If you're giving the child the instruction over and over, they're still not responding. They're not truly escape extinction in that moment. The only one that I think of that is really truly escape extinction is the forced physical prompting. The child tries to escape, you grab their hand, they do it, the escape has been extinguished. or there's been, you know, they have not been allowed to escape. So, current standards of care. Escape extinction is the current standard of care. It is best outcome based upon the research that's available to us. I'm not trying to say differently. However, we do know that the value of escape extinction, we do know that there's problems associated with escape extinction. They've been listed. Iwata, Lehrman, Wallace, and others have listed some of these, and so these are things that we need to worry about. I talked about those in the last presentation. So who might benefit from this approach? Well, a way to earn instructional control would be for anyone, including parents, school staff, unable or unwilling to use the above listed procedures safely or correctly or comprehensively. And do we run into that? We run into that all the time. Interventionists working with children whose escape behavior is also maintained by attention in escape condition. How many of you guys see that on a regular basis? Okay. And interventionists working with children who have not responded well to traditional escape extinction, meaning you've been using a program with them, you've been using traditional escape extinction, and guess what? 6 months later, you're still using half of your day is still spent in escape extinction. So these kids have not developed. You have not been able to use it successfully with them. So these are the people that we would want to have something like this for. So consent versus assent, I already kind of mentioned that. And the alternative procedures, I mentioned those in the last. Is there anybody who doesn't know what the alternative procedures are that we're talking about? Instead of, just quickly, instead of holding a child into a teaching setting, we're identifying all forms of reinforcement in the environment prior to teaching, and then making sure that those are under our control. So that if the child chooses to leave the teaching setting, that is allowed, but access to reinforcement is blocked for everything and anything that they want. And it's preferred that we don't have to block it. The whole point, the absolute whole point of doing this is to set up a situation where we do not have to be the aversive. I don't want to be the aversive in my teaching setting, ever, 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 ever. I want the child to see me as the escape from the aversives of the day. How do I get back to Mr. Schramm, because he's the guy who has all of the fun, who makes everything as cool as can be. So as soon as I set up an environment where I'm the aversive, no, you can't leave, you have to stay with me, you have to stay, I kill all the pairing that I've been doing. And the teaching relationship switches. I can pair for days and I can become the person's best friend. But as soon as I start teaching and the child tries to leave and I say, no, no, you can't, aha, I got you. They figure out exactly what our true intentions are. And then suddenly it becomes difficult. So, what is restricting child's movement? So, I'm going to show you guys a video here. This is working with a military family in Germany, so they're speaking English. And I went to this family and started working with their son. We had the first visit. I explained to them the 7 steps as well as the basics of, they've already been to a 2-day workshop with me, so they had the basics of behavior analysis down as to understanding what we were doing and why. And we explained the 7 steps, and I tried to teach them how to do it. Then we came back to our second visit, and they were still not having a lot of success in instructional control. So we were identifying, okay, what is it that you are doing right? What is it that you're not doing? Trying to identify so we can fix that. And so I asked the dad, I said, before we do anything else, just show me your pairing. Just do a little pairing with the child. And so he sits down with the child, he pulls out the child's favorite toy, and the child is sitting there playing with the toy, and every time the child leaned forward, he would grab the child and pull him back into his waist. And I said to him, and you'll hear it on the video, I said, well, why are you pulling him towards you? And he said, well, because I want to pair with him. So, well, if you're telling him where to go, you're not pairing. As soon as you give him an instruction to look at something or to do something or to be somewhere you don't want to be, pairing is over. That's over. It's now an instruction. So now we're giving instructions, but the instructions aren't helping us. It's not what we're trying to get at. So just pure pairing would not include holding the child in. So I'm telling him, let him go. But as soon as he leaves, restrict access to the reinforcer. The reinforcer stays with me. You leave if you want, the reinforcer stays here. Meanwhile, we've sanitized the rest of the environment of reinforcing items. All of his favorite reinforcers are in this box or in his room locked away. So there's no access to those things. So let's go ahead and look and maybe listen to me as I talk to them about it. Oh, I hope this works.
If he wants to get up, he should be allowed to get up, but then you just take the toy back and say, oh, you can leave, but the toy stays with me, so what do you want to do? And then when he chooses to sit back down, now he's made the choice. Okay, take the toy, okay. Now tell him if you want to play, you have to sit.
Sit down, sit, sit.
Good job, now you can play. You see, now he's not going to be pulling away from you the whole time. Now he's made the choice to sit because you restricted the reinforcement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The last thing I want you guys doing is pulling him in. Let's see if he tries it again.
Gee.
Okay, take the toy back again. Okay, you can get up if you want. Oh, you want to stay?
Stay. Oh, good. Good job. Gee.
Yeah, he's clapping because he. Sorry.
Sit.
It's okay. We can handle the tantrum. Good. The rule is, if you want to play with this toy, you play with Daddy. If you want to go by yourself and play, then you can, but you can't take the toy with you. It's that simple. And instead of manipulating him, we just manipulate the toy so that he decides to stay.
Little sisters need attention too.
Oh, come.
No.
That was a good one.
Easy. Sorry.
Sit.
You can say, if you want to play, you have to sit here.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down.
Okay, we'll just sit and wait. Everything else should be restricted. Take the...
Come. Sit down. Sit here. Come.
Now, I'm not saying you can do this without tears. There's still tears. There's always going to be tears when you're being asked to do something you would actually want to do on your own.
Okay.
Have him sit.
Sit down. Sit down.
But look at how much calmer
Good
Dad can stay
job.
during this process
Yeah.
rather than
Good.
what you're used
Now
to
you
doing.
can move yourself around him a little closer.
Good. Good job.
See, there's no reason to cry. You can play. You just play with me.
Yeah. Gee.
He will very quickly learn that the only place that toy is available to him is in Dad's lap or at the table with Dad or wherever Dad sets that up. And so quickly the behavior of leaving the lap reduces. Now Dad has the teaching setting that he wants, and he's going to be able to start incorporating some easy instructions. But if he tries to incorporate easy instructions in now, while the child is pulling away with the toy, and his response is to pull the child back, now you're going to get into basically you're going to develop a struggle. You're going to develop a physical interaction with the child based upon me getting you to stay, you trying to get away, who's going to win? Often the person who's strongest or who's most willing to go the farthest wins. And in a lot of cases, that's going to be the child in a home setting. All right, so one thing we can do for parents is we can make this all easier on them if they don't have to grab the child, hold the child, and stay on top of them, give them instructions over and over and over again. They can just hold the toy and sit back and go, okay, now what are you going to do? Puts them in a much stronger teaching position. They're more likely to follow day in and day out. And that's what we need. I mean, I'm working without behavioral technicians. My families need to be doing behavioral interactions with their kids 24/7. You know, if they're awake, they're interacting with them behaviorally. They're following instructions. And they can't do that if they're following escape extinction procedures throughout most of their day. That's when you need to have someone else come in and do that, who can do that and then go home after they get their paycheck. And that's a little bit different. You have a question?
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
This looks like it would work great if you have pretty good control over the source of reinforcement. How about for kids that engage in high levels of self-stim or sensory reinforcement with the problem?
Yeah, that's the first question I usually get.
Where do you recommend people go with that?
Yeah. When we get through the 7 steps, when we get to step 7 on instructional control, you have to look at the way the step is worded. It says, show the child that not following an instruction or behaving in an inappropriate behavior will not lead to reinforcement. In other words, when you see an inappropriate behavior or the child refuses to participate, we have to shut down all forms of reinforcement. That's the rule. Now, if the child is going to go off and he's going to start stimming, did we shut down all forms of reinforcement? No, so we didn't follow the rule. So if we have a child who is going to go off and self-stim, there's 2 things that I always tell people. First, let them go do that. Because often children will they'll self-stimulate because there's nothing better to do, but within 10-15 minutes, they'll start getting bored and want to come back, and they'll want to engage. So if a child goes and stims and you're over there playing with their toys, and they're like, oh, I don't care, I don't need you, I'm just going to do my thing over here, boo, 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 this is fun. And you just ignore them and keep playing, and all of a sudden, within 10 minutes or so, they start getting louder, they start coming closer to you, they start stimming over by you. To me, that tells me we're in a good position. This will work then. We don't have to worry too much about the stims. But there are kids who will sit down and they'll stim for 7-8 hours straight, perfectly happy. They would rather be there than anywhere else in the world. In that case, we do have to then block the stim. We either have to physically block the stim, maybe not let the child lay down if laying down is part of it. Maybe we have to verbally interrupt But the thing that's different about what we do is that we do that away from the teaching setting. See, all the aversives, if we do need to become an aversive, I want that all to be done away from our teaching setting, so that the child's attempt to escape will be escape the aversive back to the teaching setting. So they're being motivated to escape to teaching, as opposed to where we do all of these things in the teaching setting, which motivates them to try to escape, to get away. So if I'm gonna have, my teaching setting is gonna be as fun as it possibly can be. I'm gonna play, I'm gonna pair, we're gonna have a good time, I'm gonna give instructions, I'm gonna mix and vary my tasks, all the MOs that I know how to do to make sure that teaching is fun. But when the child refuses, I'm going to send them away from teaching, or allow them to leave teaching. So, okay, then I guess you're not ready for this, and I'll pull this back. And we actually just do a wait out. But if the child goes and starts stimming and those things, then we have to get in the way and block those. Maybe if the child likes running around and can just run around the room, then we can't get step 7. We don't have extinction in that situation. So we may have to go to a timeout, maybe an inclusionary timeout, where we take the child into a smaller area that we have to restrict reinforcement during that for this to work. But I still find it overall being a better long-term approach to do those aversive things like nagging or blocking stims or restricting of movement away from the teaching setting. Because now you're putting the child in a position where escaping that means going back to the teaching setting, which is what we want our children to see this teaching setting as the escape, as the way to more reinforcement. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I have a follow-up observation.
Yeah. Sure.
Sometimes you can identify the source of the sensory stimuli. Let's say it's auditory stimuli or movement stimuli, proprioceptive stimuli. Sometimes you can beat the hell out of what the kid can do himself or herself by providing music or a lava lamp or a swing that spins the child around. So sometimes you can provide a higher quality and quantity of sensory stimuli that's under your control than the child can present under his or her own control.
That will already have been taken care of in step number 1. If we know that the child likes to swing, or we know that the child likes to listen to music, or we know that the child likes, that's already going to be controlled by us, and it's going to be used in our teaching setting. So there will always be access to the music. And here's another thing that's different about what we do than what a lot of places will do. I really do not like to decide what the child will work for. I really don't want to be the one saying, oh, guess what, you're going to work for me, you're going to do what I ask, and here's what I'm going to give you for it. That's not a really, that doesn't tend to work in our society really well either, does it? I mean, I guess it's working in America these days. It got rid of unions. But that's another point. The point I'm trying to get at is when I work with a child, I walk in and I say, do you want to play? What do you want to play? I let the child choose his reinforcer. Do you want to go on the swings? Do you want to do? And I may give a limit as to what is allowed. But if the child says, oh, I want to go to the swings. Great, then we'll go to the swings, and we'll engage in the swings in a way that's as fun as could possibly be, and we're going to do what I'm going to teach about, if we have time at the end, which I don't think we will, is the teaching arc. And I'll just really quickly give you guys the teaching arc since it came up. The teaching arc is, I'm going to start with just a period of peering alone. I'm going to slowly fade in some instructions, intermixing easy those instructions with more pairing and fun. We're going to then start to incorporate a few of our more difficult, the actual learning tasks that we have for that child for the day, intermixed with easy skills, which would be the maintenance skills, and more fun. But at some point before we start to push that child beyond their limit, our teacher needs to then start to ease off of some of those more difficult ones, go back to a higher reinforcement value, get to the point where they're just pairing alone, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of just pure pairing, and then the teacher stops the engagement and says, okay, we're done with swings. That was fun, I hope you had a good time. And what we want to make sure that we do is we start it with full 100% fun, we finish it with 100% fun, and we work the middle so that we're getting our instructions in, intermixed, so that doesn't get to the point where the child wants to avoid. If they do escape or try to avoid, we go through the steps out, and we bring them back. But if we can start with fun and finish with fun and get through that, then we can turn around and say, okay, well, swings are done, what do you want to do now? And we go to the child, what is his interest? I want to watch TV. Great, well, let's turn on the TV, let's tickle, let's play, let's goof with the TV. A couple minutes of just pairing alone, fade back in instructions, get to our learning goals, get out while the child is still motivated and still responding well, fade back down, cut it off and say, okay, we're done with that. What do you want to do now? And it's leaving the child with the experience of that setting having been worthwhile, being fun. I want to go back to the TV with you. I want to go back to the swings with you because that whole experience was beneficial. And so we try to teach our behavior technicians, or in our case, we try to teach our parents how to do that. If they're going to sit down with a child for 3 hours, we take them through one teaching arc to the next, and teaching arcs are developed over time. You know, they start with just pure pairing, and then you start to sneak in some instructions, and they grow bigger and wider as you go. Yeah, question?
I worked with Lovas, like I heard you mention that years ago, back in the late 90s. And they used to have you, when we gave that highly coveted reinforcer, like you said, they chose, but then they only could have it during their intervention. Do you?
Yeah, I haven't seen any real need for that. I mean, I'll watch TV all day, so if you let me watch TV as part of the intervention and I don't watch it, I mean, yeah, there's some value to satiation. If you're going to want to use TV as a reinforcer, you may not want them watching 3 hours of TV before you get there, so there's some value to that. But I don't know about withholding it completely in their life, because something has to be reinforcing for it to maintain the reinforcement value. I mean, you have to experience it and enjoy it for it to remain enjoyable. If something's out of your mind, if you completely forget about something and you don't have that value available to you, you may not seek it out. You may lose interest in it, you may not seek it out. So, I don't know. I don't have a strong, hard and fast rule about that. The one thing I will tell you this is when my wife was working with a Lovas program, the thing that she did with them, that she was taught to do that I really hated, was go play. I do not believe in go play as a reinforcer. I avoid it like the plague. Reinforcement is an interaction between teacher and student, because to teach a child, God, you've got me thinking about my language here.
Let it go, man.
Okay. If I want a child to learn to do a skill, or to start following an SD, okay? I want to give that SD, I want to give the reinforcement, I want it to be followed, but I also want it to be followed where I want the reinforcement to have a social component in nature. Because I'm trying to teach a child who is generally has autism, which means that in most cases, their social skills are deficit to some degree. I want them to see me as the giver of the good things. I want to see me as the opportunity for fun. And that's not going to happen when your reinforcer is go play. Let's work together, work together. Oh, no, I'm not going to let you leave. Stay here, stay here. You did a great job. Go play. Go be by yourself. Go be autistic somewhere else. I don't like that at all. For me, the reinforcement is always going to be an involved interaction between the teacher. Even if the teacher is just sitting there while the child's playing with their thing and the teacher's tickling or giving a massage, it's always going to be positive reinforcement. Otherwise, the negative reinforcement, and we're going to get to that. I try to avoid negative reinforcement like the plague in most of my work. Did you have another question that I jumped over? Was there anyone else? Okay, so step one is restriction of reinforcement or control of reinforcement. We have to identify everything that could be reinforcing. If the child likes playing with dust, then we'll take sand and we'll take beans and we'll try dust and we'll try all these different things and we'll try to engage with the child. And when we know that we have things that they really like better than dust, then that'll be part of our teaching setting. So we're putting ourselves in a better position than dust as an escape. But if the child is okay doing dust long enough, we may have to block the dust as well. Okay? And so step one is to restrict. Step two, pair yourself with reinforcement. Alternates to forced physical prompting. So really, this is just about. I don't force physically prompt anymore. I really don't. I think that I mentioned the boy that I worked with. He may have been the last child I've ever forced physically prompted. Beyond maybe someone who was engaged in a STEM behavior, and I tried to get through that with the parent just to help, so that the parent could see what we were supposed to do, even though I explained I would normally let him wait until he's done. I don't want to force kids into responding. I don't want passive responding if I can avoid it. Now, we will use passive responding in errorless learning. You know, if the child is sitting there and you say, okay, touch your nose, and you help it with the nose, you know, that's all fine. But as soon as the child starts to fight me, I consider that a 7 steps issue. I would rather step back and say, okay, now we have resistance to that prompt. To me, that's an escape condition. That's an escape behavior. I'm going to use my 7 steps, and I'm going to now shut down reinforcement. I'm going to wait. And then when the child comes back to me for something else, can I play with that? Can I have that? I want more of this. That's when I'll repeat the instruction. Okay, then cut your nose. I'll help you. Whatever it might take. So we do prompt. We just don't force physically prompt. And then you saw the Colin video. Were there any questions or thoughts about the Colin video at all? He's, you know, the thing I think that's most valuable about this video is seeing not only that he does come back and participates without being manipulated to do so, but that immediately the next time he does it again. And the time after that he does it again, and he does it again. So even though you saw us wait him out for 20-some minutes before he came back to us, and sometimes that can be longer than that, we may have to wait a child out 2 hours if he's got a long enough period of believing, of engaging in these types of extinction behaviors and then ultimately getting them reinforced. But once we've shown a child that we're not going to reinforce any of these other behaviors other than the behavior of interest, and they then do the behavior, you often see a very drastic, immediate drop in that off-task time. And there's somebody, I want to mention this, there's somebody named Heather, I should know her last name and I'll get it. She's presenting a paper today at 4 o'clock where they used the 7 steps and they took data on their progress. And so you guys can go and see her at 4. Is she in here? Heather, are you in here by any chance? No, she's not here. Yes?
Well, what comes to mind for me with like in-home therapy, like I totally agree with everything you're saying. I think this is wonderful. But then there's another challenge to it when you got in-home therapy. It just seems like they're always going to find something reinforcing in the environment. Like with this case, it was simple. He just fell down on the floor, waited it out, then he came back. But you know, in other cases, he might find just some little random trinket, you know, and on like the counter or something, and then like find that reinforcing. So it's like it'd be difficult just to ignore them.
Yeah, that's true. All kids are going to be different. And I have another video I can show you guys, but I have to search it out. It's a boy who, when he was in the extinction condition, which we call it, or where Steve calls it waiting him out, when we're waiting the child out. We call it putting every behavior on extinction other than behavior of interest. Someone else should be labeling these things for me. But in those situations, we had a child who went over and started banging on the big screen TV because he knew that that's what would affect Dad. And so what we would recommend to people to do at that point is we would go over and we would block the TV, but without any additional eye contact or any additional vocal responding. Our goal is to minimize reinforcement availability. Now, if your child then runs over and grabs a plant, then you have to walk over there and try to block it from the plant, and then he runs over and grabs something else, and now if you're chasing him, we're not in the position we want to be in. So there's a couple things we have to do. One, we tell families anything that you don't want ruined in the beginning stages of earning an instructional control, get it up or out. If you cannot stand having this picture of your grandfather and grandmother broken, then don't have it on the wall while we're doing this. Take it out now, go put it in your bedroom, lock it up, put it where you need it to be. Because I would rather the child knock over plants, you know, take the cushions off of things, and for the family to be able to just sit there and ignore it. Say, okay, no problem, it's not a big issue. Because I know that once that child does all of these things and doesn't get the response they're looking for, then they start looking for other ways to get their reinforcement. That's all that's happening in the situation. When you put a behavior on extinction, the child will extinction burst. Other behaviors in an attempt to gain that reinforcement. So let's say they do start doing things like grabbing the pictures or the plants. If you can convince your family that in the long-term best interest, move what you can't afford to lose, let everything else go, and just spend the first week or 2 in a situation where your house is maybe not the way you want it to be, but you're able to follow through with this, what will happen is once the child starts realizing that there's no ability to gain attention or reinforcement through any of these other methods, they fade away. And what happens is the behavior starts coming back to, okay, what do you want from me? You want me to do this? All right, I'll do this. I'll get it over. Once you've got that, all it takes is one time. If you can fight through that, whatever it is, 30 minutes, half hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it takes, and you get that first time where the child goes, all right, there, I did it. Are you happy now? And you go, yeah, pair, and you give all kinds of access to reinforcement. Everything they've ever wanted throughout that entire process, they're open to them. And you give them a good period of time, the difference between those two becomes very apparent very quickly. We really are saying, this is our teaching setting. It is an oasis. It is filled with water, and beautiful, beautiful ladies in bikinis, and whatever's gonna turn this person on. We've got it right there, it's gorgeous, it's ready to go. And then we've got the desert. And those are your 2 options. I talked to my parents about turning on the water faucet, and like if you're gonna go outside and you wanna water you wanna water the grass. We're not allowed to do that in California anymore, but you know what I mean. You have to be a spigot that is either fully on, or fully off. And the child needs to be able to know the difference between when I'm on and when I'm off, when you're on and when you're off. Because so much of our teaching is all mixed up in here. you know, they're kind of getting reinforced for stuff, but then they're kind of getting in trouble for stuff, but there's still attention during that when they're not doing it appropriately, and it's all kind of intermixed together. So the kid never really is able to identify what it is in the environment that's causing this or that, because we're not consistent enough with it. So we teach our families, you're either on, meaning giving them everything you can think to give them and teaching them intermixed with it at a good ratio, or you're off, shutting everything down, blocking access to everything, not allowing them to go. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I like the king of 20-minute answers to 2-second questions. Yeah.
Another 2 seconds. I noticed a lot of hassling where she was fighting with the kid to get the toy back.
Yeah.
Is it a lot easier to use an iPad and you hold it, or TV?
Yeah.
So how you control it, you can turn it off and on, and the kid, that you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, I think you're asking this for everyone else, because I think you know the answer, obviously. But I think it's a good point to bring up. And when we teach our families and people about pairing, we talk to them about, if you're going to pair yourself you're going to pair yourself in your teaching environment with reinforcement, best thing, the easiest thing to pair with is consumables, things that go away, or things that are easy to control. A TV where you control the remote, or a radio where you control the remote. Bubbles where you blow them, they pop, they need you for more. Or those spinny toys where you can crank them up and you spin them, but the child doesn't know how to work the crank. I had a behavior technician, it was not a behavior technician, it was a trainee to become a consultant. And I said to her, I said, okay, go pair with yourself with the spinny toys. She really likes those. So I'm talking to the parent, I look over and I see her, the kid is holding the crank, and she's going, okay, turn it like this. And I'm going, no! The whole value and benefit of that as a paired reinforcer is the fact that he needs you to do it. Everything about what we teach, we want them to need us in order to enjoy it. You know, a kid can enjoy himself on the swings, but can he enjoy himself as much as when you push him really high, when you stand in front of him and jump out of the way, or you get hit in the butt? So I don't want the child to say, I want to go to the swings. That's crap for teaching. I want the child to say, I want you to come to the swings with me. Let's go. I want the swings to be considered no fun without me there, because comparatively they are. And so everything we do, that's why even sitting down at the TV, you need to find a way to make the TV more fun, because that way when you're teaching, you're doing positive reinforcement, as opposed to all of the negative reinforcement you end up doing, where the child's working to go play, working to go have time by themselves. I want them to be seeking me out at all times. That allows me to always be in the teaching position. Question?
I sometimes struggle to think of reinforcers for older kids that are like, 12 to 14 that aren't electronic.
You just reminded me. Now to finish your question, when I teach people, I'll get to you in a second, and maybe this will answer it. When I teach people about pairing, the question always comes, well, what about toys? How do you pair with toys? Well, you saw Dad in that one video was having to pull the toy back. That's not always easy to do. I never try to pair with toys by playing with the toy the child's already playing with. The key to pairing with toys is having multiple options that you know are all valuable. Because when a child's playing with something, I would much rather, if I'm going to pair with that child, I'm never going to go touch the toy he's playing with. The second I try to get involved in it, I'm already not pairing. I'm already an aversive. I'm already somehow interacting in a way that's not what he wanted to be doing on his own. So what I do instead is I pull out another toy that I know has reinforcing value, and I try to make that toy even more reinforcing, or look like more fun. Just the fact that I have his damn toy is usually enough for him to go, oh, what do you put it down and come over to me. Now he puts his toy down, comes over to me and wants to play with that toy. Now I'm like, yeah, look what I could do, and here you go. And then I can pair with him for a little bit, then he takes control of it, and I scoop up that other one, put it back in my bag. Now if I don't have access to him again, then I pull out another one, I start doing that. He's like, what are you doing with my toy? And then I start to engage with him some more. I try not to pair with toys with the toy the child already has, although in some cases you can develop it. And you gotta be careful that you're not using the toy to teach as well. Like lining up cars. If the child just wants to line up cars, and you're like, yeah, let's play with cars, vroom, vroom, vroom. The child's going, no, that's work. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. So you're not pairing. Don't feel like just because we're using cars that we're pairing if what you're really doing is giving instructions. All right, let me keep moving here because I know I'm going to be running out of time. So we talked a little bit about the 7 steps already. We said step 1, step 2 was pairing yourself with reinforcement. Step 3. This is kind of what we just went over. No instructions at all. If you start giving an instruction, you're not pairing anymore. It's over. That process is over. Now you're teaching. Let the child play with what he wants, the way he wants. Don't try to pair with items that the child's already holding or playing with. Instead, pull out a new item that they might and try to make it more interesting. Just sitting with the child and not interrupting is a form of pairing. Always easiest to pair with consumable reinforcers. Whenever possible, find physical reinforcers that are social in nature. Tickles and swinging and all those things that you can do that are physical in nature, they need you to get that. So if I want that experience, where do I have to go? To my teacher. I want this engagement with my kids all the time, no matter what happens. And here's the difference between our approach to instructional control and what you typically see. Here's a teacher, here's a student. You're engaged together, and the student does what? And what do teachers do? And then the student does what? And the teacher goes here. And what you end up having is this chase game, where the student becomes better and better at avoiding the teaching. And the teacher ends up spending all their time trying to get that attention. We don't do that at all. We do the exact opposite. Child does this, boop, we do this. The child goes, Okay, there's nothing over here because they took everything. What are they doing over there? And as the child comes to us to look, then we turn back to them, we start teaching again. We start playing, engaging, teaching, all of that together. And then they go like this, we go, okay, see you later. Oh, crap, this didn't work. What do I do now? And then they start coming back, boom, we go back again. We teach, engage, they turn away, we turn away again. That's the approach that seems to work better for us. You're not consistently trying to pull anything out of a child ever. If anything, you're pushing them away. In fact, we get to the point with a lot of our kids where if they're engaging and they're just kind of lazy and they're just not engaging very well, say, you know what, you don't really want to work right now. See you later, bye. And I can do that because they've already determined they would rather be with me than anywhere else in that room or anywhere else that they can go because I've made sure that that's the case. So once I say, no, sorry, that's not good enough, then that becomes a condition motivating reflexive to say, oh crap, this is a worsening set of conditions. I'm about to be left out here in the desert. How do I get back to the oasis? What do I have to do? You wanted me to touch my nose? I'll do it faster, I'll do it better, whatever. That's really what we're trying to get at. Step number 3, this is just being contingent. But when we teach it to parents, and we teach it to teachers, we have to have a system. You can't just say pair yourself with reinforcement and these things. If we give them these 7 steps, then we have 7 things that we can go back and look at them and we can say, okay, you're not earning your instructional control. Well, let's watch what you're doing and I'll tell you which of these 7 steps you're not doing. You know what? It's obvious you're not being contingent. You're saying this, but you're not following through. You told him to come and sit down, he didn't sit down, yet he still has reinforcement available to him. So you're not following step number 3, so of course you don't have instructional control. Or here, the child refused to respond, and you're letting him go over there, sit in the corner and stim. Well, did you restrict access to reinforcement during the escape condition? No, then you didn't do step number 7, so you're not going to be successful. Do you have restriction of reinforcement? Is the child able to get it on his own? Are you using positive reinforcement? Or are you using negative reinforcement? Carefully selecting your SDs is something. If you're not going to follow through with an instruction, just don't give it, you tell them. If you can't follow through, if you're going to give in after a half-hour fighting, then don't give it to begin with. If you're too tired, you got home from work, and you don't want your child to jump on the couch. So he starts jumping on the couch, you say, don't jump on the couch. And then 10 minutes into a waiting out situation, you're just like, screw it, jump on the couch, I can't do this anymore. Well, then you shouldn't have told him to not jump on the couch from the beginning, because basically what you're saying is, my words don't really mean what I want them to mean. And the actual understanding of the words we use is 100% dependent upon the consequence that comes from them. All the time our parents say, no, don't do that. Like a child will go running across the room swinging the cat. And the dad will say, no, don't do that, put the cat down, that's not okay. Crap, I can't get up, I can't deal with that. And then the child basically hears, good job, way to go, that was nice, have fun. Because ultimately the consequence of your words, that's what it basically says to the child it means. No only means no if it's followed by a consequence that's meaningful. You know this. Step 4, we want to start with giving lots of reinforcement for lots of small, simple instructions to begin with. We got to change the culture. Our kids have developed contracts with us. They have this contract that says, I decide what we do and you do it. And that contract has been, signed off by both the parents and the child gets to decide everything, and the parent runs around trying to make sure that they're okay. And what we're asking the parents to do is to negotiate a new contract. And that extinction burst behavior, that's the child's negotiations. And if the child's is a better negotiator than we are, then we're going to end up with that same horrible contract that allows the child to get away with everything and learn nothing. So we've got to change the contract, and we've got to stand up during that wait out time. That's our negotiation ability. Can we Can we hold on to what we've determined needs to be set up in this contract? These are the rules of the contract. And we're gonna wait you out until we get those met. If the child meets those, then we're gonna give lots of reinforcement because that's part of the contract. But if they don't, then we're gonna withhold reinforcement, that's part of the contract. Once the child makes the decision, yes, I'm gonna be part of this, I'm going to follow your instruction now, even though I've tried to fight it for 3 hours, but now I'm gonna do it, they're basically signing the contract. They're saying, okay, I'm in on this, this is our new contract. And if you do it consistently, if you don't give up on it, but you do it consistently day in and day out, suddenly that becomes the contract you live by, and you no longer have to fight anymore. The negotiation's been taken care of. As opposed to programs where you're negotiating nonstop over months and years sometimes, constantly negotiating. Can I pull you in, or are you learning now? What do I have to do? And so I really like this as an alternative approach.
Hey, Robert?
Yes?
It sounds great in concept. How about in reality? I mean, life goes on. The school bell rings, the day's done. Parents have got to go to work. Someone's got to go to bed eventually.
Well,
you can't wait everything out. What do you recommend to those conditions?
Okay, well, we do this with, like I said, over 350 children, and well over 97, 98% we use no escape extinction. So it does work. It does work in a variety of settings. How does it work? What do we do? Well, we do things like, we have, it's an itinerant teacher, someone coming in to do a 1-hour speech pathology program. We would want to make sure that maybe that speech pathology teacher has some reinforcement available that's not available to him throughout the rest of his day. So maybe it's something that he can't have in the classroom, that he really loves, that could be available to him. Now, we bring him in there, and instead of struggling, fighting with him to try to get him to engage, we play with this toy, this thing that he wants more than anything else. When he comes, we engage with him, we play, we start to teach. He pulls away, and we sit and wait it out. And the teacher says, but I can't wait it out, because in 45 minutes, he's gonna go, and I'm not gonna have access to him, and then I can't do any teaching for the whole 45 minutes. And I say, well, try it, see what happens. And we will have a teacher wait out the entire 45 minutes, sitting there playing, because this is teaching. The child's not having access to the reinforcer, following the inappropriate behavior is teaching. Now, what is it teaching? So the way I ask them is say, do it, and then do it the next day when he comes in, and do it the next day when he comes in, see what happens. And all it takes is the child to make that decision one time that oh great, I gotta go to speech for an hour, and I'm gonna sit there for a whole hour and watch her play with my favorite toy. How often is a child gonna be willing to do that? And if as soon as he says, you know what, forget that, I'll do what you want, now you're gonna teach more in the next 3 weeks than you probably would have taught in the next 6 months the other way. And because now you've got motivated learning. Now you've got a child who's engaged, who's trying to answer who's doing their best to respond to your SDs, and who's, I don't even know. God, you're so in my head. I spend all my time talking to parents, and so I slip very far sometimes from good behavioral speak. And now that I'm back in these rooms, I have to get myself back. Yes?
Are these settings mostly one-on-one? Some of the educators I've worked with would say in a classroom full of children, if they try to wait out that behavior, sometimes the other children in the classroom reinforce it.
Yeah, well, if
They're
you're
laughing at it, or
if you can't extinguish, if you can't put a child into a situation of extinction of alternative behaviors, meaning you can't use you can't use extinction during the escape condition of all other behaviors except for the behavior of interest, because you just can't do it, then there's other options available to you. In my book, where I have 2 chapters that talks about, one talks about the first 6 steps, and the other one talks about the 7th step. And then I have a later chapter where I talk about advanced behavioral considerations. And here we talk about things like, if you can't restrict access to reinforcement in that condition, then a timeout type of a setting might be necessary. So if I can't remove the reinforcer from the child, I may have to remove the child from the reinforcement setting. So if I have to take the child out of the classroom into a smaller classroom or into a bathroom to wait them out, I may choose to do that. If I have to block the child from being able to run around, I may do that. If the child is stimulating and able to enjoy themselves, I may have to block that. But I want to do all of those things away from the teaching setting. I don't want to do anything that ever disrupts the power of when you're here with me engaged with reinforcement. It'll be a positive. It'll be positive reinforcement, so much that you can handle. I want to make sure that all the aversives are done away from the teaching setting. That way, I'm always motivating the child back. No one escapes into prison. They escape out of prison. So if your teaching setting is a prison, meaning you're not allowing them to escape, then they're going to be doing everything they can to escape out of prison. But if I can turn the non-teaching setting into the quote-unquote prison, now I'm setting up a situation where the child's going to be trying to escape back into teaching setting. Now, when I get that, and the child makes that turn, and now we've turned the tables, and the child is no longer running away from us, but now running to us, and we're sometimes turning away from them, saying, sorry, that wasn't good enough, Oh, well, what if I do this? Oh, no, that's not good enough either. Oh, what if I do this? Now you've got them, now you've turned the tables on autism, and that's why I titled the book that, because you're no longer chasing them to teach, they're chasing you to learn. That's what we're trying to get at. And this approach allows us to do that much better, I find, than using escape extinction for those reasons specifically. But again, there needs to be more data on this, and if anybody is in a setting where you're able to sit and do some research, I'm open to speaking with you about helping you with training and getting it up and running, because the more data I can get, the better. And we all know that that's important, so I would really like to have that opportunity. Is there any other questions at this point? Step 6 is demonstrating you know your own priorities in the child's. And this really just talks about making sure that you know the reinforcers, that you're giving more reinforcement for better responding, and that if the child says chocolate, but grabs the chocolate out of your hand, that your teacher knows, do I reinforce that or not? Well, normally you would say, no, you don't reinforce the grabbing, unless they've never said chocolate before, and chocolate is a higher priority in your program, the fact that they've said a 2-syllable word or 3-syllable, whatever. So your program needs to decide what is it that you're reinforcing and what you're not. And then step number 7 becomes the big one, and that's just making sure that as soon as you get that behavior that's inappropriate, or the child doesn't follow instruction, or maybe smacks their sister or something, that we go straight into extinction of all behavior other than the behavior of interest. And everything and anything they try to do is going to be, the answer is going to be no. The access to attention is going to be nil. However, when they demonstrate a motivation, they come to you and they go, that's when we repeat our instruction, and only then. We don't repeat it at times when there's low motivation. Why repeat instruction when the child's probably not going to follow it anyway? And then you give them 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 instructions that they're not going to follow, when you can just sit and wait it out, and then when they come to you and they're, as you say, okay, yeah, touch your nose. Touch your nose. And as soon as they start to pull away, then I turn away again. I stop giving instructions, stop giving attention. Okay? And then also we use negative punishment. The child already has access to a reinforcer. They're already playing with something. Go ahead and play with that. And I give an instruction and they're not listening, then I will touch your nose. No? Okay. Sure? Touch. Oh, that's okay, that's better. And we set up that conditioned motivating operant reflexive, but we set it up in the escape condition rather than worrying about it in just our teaching condition. We want them to see this as a signal that life is about to start getting worse if I don't start behaving differently, and that causes the reflexive change in behavior. So all of this works together really well to put us in a situation where our teaching is going to be as palatable as possible, and when the child chooses to escape, escape is allowed so they can experience it, but that the value of that escape is manipulated to be so far lower in value than what we're offering as a teaching setting that all it takes is a matter of time before the decision to participate becomes more and more frequent, and your SDs become followed more regularly, and you start getting better and better instructional control. Oh, here's a video. You can show this one. Here's a boy named Anton. How much time do I have? Probably not much.
25 minutes.
Okay, cool. So here's a boy named Anton. Anton is, I think he was 5 years old at the time. Now, realize that we have a lot of limitations as to what we can do in Germany, and I had a lot of ethical concerns when I first got started there. It's like, I know we're not giving the best amount of service necessary to be successful. However, the alternative is 0. So ethically, what can we do? We had to kind of create our limits where we had to feel that we were going to be we were going to be able to make meaningful differences. In this case, this is a family who lived over in Eastern Germany, and they weren't getting any kind of cost coverage for supports, and so they didn't have the money to pay for monthly visits. So what we did was we went in and we spent 3 days with them, and this is kind of interesting. This is kind of how our program goes. At least it did in the early days. We're doing more about. We're usually doing one visit a month now, at least. But we would go in and work with the family for 3 days. We would teach them everything they needed to know about that basic, very beginning program that they could do on their own once we left. And then we would leave, and then we would leave them to it, to work on it. We would be available by phone and email, video consults. And then we would come back a month or 2 months later. In this case, we come back 2 months later, and then you can see the progress that they've made. We look at the places where they're still making mistakes. We fix that. We move them forward a little bit. We move them up on the ables where they're going with their goals that they're working on. And we start to teach, we give them more information, and then we come back again. In this case, we came back the third time 4 months after the second visit. So by the time you see the end of this video, what you'll see is 6 months have passed, but we've given the family a total of 3, 4, 5, 6 days of service. No, 5 days of service. So what you'll see by the 6 months is 5 days of service. So they've only paid for 5 days of service. Yeah. What's that?
How many hours?
6 hours in the home, 2 hours of riding time. And so this is what you can. This is what we were able to demonstrate with just minimal service. This is the initial.
Give him one for sitting if he sits.
So the instruction is to sit down. If he sits, he gets reinforced. However, if he yells and screams, we're going to not reinforce. If he reaches, he's not going to get it. So my wife is just waiting for a behavior she can, then give an instruction to. She's going to make the choice to pull him away from the teaching setting. It's the opposite of what you normally do, right? She's going to show him, you don't get to be here with us right now. And he goes to the big screen TV. He threatens to hit that first because he knows his dad responds to that. So Nadine goes over, no attention, just blocks it. He sees no one's guarding the flips, the Cheetos, so he goes for those. Right now we're just trying to reinforce sitting at the table. But we're not making him sit at the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, good job.
He sits, but he cries and says, ow. Every time Nadine comments on how quiet he is or how good he's being, he screams. So she has to stop doing that. The quieter he is, the closer the reinforcers come to him, the more he's screaming and yelling, the more farther away he's getting pulled away. Now these things here is something called hanuta. Pause. The hanuta was, when I said to the family, I said, okay, we're going to try to do something with him now. What's his favorite food reinforcer in the entire world? And I said, hanuta. And I said, okay, go get some. They got this big honking 3-decker chocolate chip thing covered, whatever it was. And it was gigantic, right? And she gives it to me, and I say, okay. And I open it up, and I start to crack a piece off. And as I'm cracking it off, Mom's going, no! What? What? She says, now he won't eat it. I'm like, what do you mean he won't eat it? You said this was his favorite thing in the world. Said, yeah, it's his favorite thing, but once you crack it, he won't eat it anymore. So I have to give him another whole one. So he's set up a contract in their environment that not only do you have to give me my favorite thing, but you have to give it to me in the way that I can control exactly how much I get. Otherwise, I'll refuse it. And so that's the contract that's been set up. And I said, well, that doesn't work for me. There's no way I can teach with this. So I just started breaking it. And as I broke it, every time I broke it, he would go, and I put it on the table. And so we said, if you want a hanuta, you have to have this broken one. He's like, no, hanuta, a fresh one. No, sorry, you have to have this one. And eventually he started saying, well, this is too much work. I'll take a flip. Flips. And that's when we started teaching with the flips. So now here we are on the video, and the flips are no longer coming free and easy. Now he's got to sit for the flips or maybe touch the table for the flips. So suddenly he's like, well, if I'm going to have to do this stuff anyway, I might as well get the hanuta, which I always wanted to begin with. And so now he's actually going to see if I can find that spot. Yeah, so now he's starting to ask for the hanuta again, which is really just a man for the original candy, which he refused to eat before. The fact that he's loud and staying near us tells us we're winning. what we have is more valuable than what you can do away from us. He had lots of language, but none of it was functional. He was just echoing, stating things he's heard.
Sure, now give my kid instruction.
Like he's just careful.
Yeah. You sitting?
Aha, Andy ate the Hanuta, the broken Hanuta. So not only did we get him to sit in order to eat, but we got him to eat something that he had refused to eat before. He asked for another one, and my wife tries to get some work from him. Okay, so this is the process day one.
Quicker.
This is the process day one of doing this. We come back 2 months later. Now the family's done this all by
Anton,
themselves.
möchtest du weiter schaukeln? Ja. Dann komm zum Tisch. Komm, dann gucken wir uns die Tiere an. Dann komm zum Tisch, setz dich hin. So, halt. Mama gibt dir. Anton, was ist das? Was ist das? Mach's besser. Was ist das? Mach's besser. Das ist die? K. Wie macht die Katze? Prima, die ist drauf.
Now he's saying dog because dog is his favorite. He's always saying dog, and that's not the right answer there. And mom is doing a lot of teaching mistakes still.
Das ist der Löwe. Wie macht der Löwe? Ah, prima, leg drauf.
But his sitting, his participation, his willingness to engage in learning aspects for reinforcement has all grown immensely. He's happier. He's no longer fighting and tantruming, trying to avoid. He's not as responding yet the way we want him to be responding, but that's the next process. That's what I've got with the family to do. Their teaching has to be better. Their instructional control process is good, but the teaching isn't great yet. So now 4 months after this,
Zeig mir Klatschen. Möchtest du Flips an? Ja. Zeig mir Klatschen. Wo ist deine Nase? Prima. Wo ist dein Bauch? Wo sind Mamas Augen? Prima.
Was macht das?
remember, he didn't have any functional
Möchtest du ein oder drei Flips? Bitte schön. Und dann dreh dich. Zeig mir hüpfen. Zeig mir hüpfen. Prima. Mach das. Mach das. Zeig mir Nadines Ohren. Wo sind Nadines Ohren? Da sind Nadines Ohren. Möchtest du einen Flip? Ja. Bitte schön. So prima jemand. Was macht das Mädchen?
What is this girl doing? Eating an apple.
Ganz prima. Was macht der Mann?
What is this man doing?
Prima. Und der Junge?
Riding a bike.
Prima.
The
Was
level,
macht der
the
Junge?
speed at which his kids started whipping through the Abel's assessment at that time was just unbelievable.
Prima. Was macht der Mann? Was macht der Mann?
He doesn't know this answer, but he's trying.
Der saugt Staub.
There's another video where dad asks him, what is dad doing? And the kid says, glass. And dad says, no, taking the glass. And he goes, oh yeah, taking the glass. And then he goes, what is dad doing? He goes, glass. And you can see him, and then dad says, no, taking the glass. He goes, taking glass. As he's walking away from his dad, you can see him rehearsing to himself, taking the glass, taking the glass. He's actively engaged in knowing the answers, and that's what motivating learning is all about, right? Just need some more time, and I need some help. Yeah.
Now this child right here, was this training just with the parents, or was this training done with the teachers at school that he saw?
In this case, in a lot of our cases, we started with the families at home first. When we were able to make great progress at home, we were able to get into the schools to say, look what we've done. And the teachers were like, okay, you can do that for us too, please? And then we would engage with them there. School settings, there was another question you had earlier. Where we teach in like a special day classroom with maybe 8 or 10 kids, I always like to do center-based teaching, and I like to cordon off areas where reinforcement's available and areas where it's void of reinforcement. That way, when you're sitting at a table with a child and you're engaging and they don't want to respond, you can just push them away from the table and keep teaching the other kids. They have nowhere to go, nothing to do. Or if it gets bad enough, you can take the other kids, bring them into the play area, let them have the access to the reinforcers, have another teacher doing social skills with them while you're waiting out the behavior over here. If you're engaging in an area that can be blocked off, that has the toys, and the child hits somebody, first thing you do, you scoop them up, you put them outside of that area, and you say, okay, what do you want to do? I want to come back in. All right, go say you're sorry, or whatever your consequence is, whatever your behavioral plan states, and then you let them right back in, and then you start engaging again. So it's that on and off of the water faucet that is so crucial. But we don't, with traditional escape extinction, we don't allow the water to ever be off. We just force them, or we keep giving them attention, or we keep giving them instructions. We don't let them leave, and it just kind of takes, in my mind, it makes everything backwards. So that's why I really love this. And you know, with more time and more opportunity, I'm hoping everyone will start to love this, and we'll have the literature or the evidence to really be able to say this is going to become, I hope someday, become best practice. I feel like I have to go to him first.
No,
but your
you're
hand is up
fine,
first.
you're fine.
Your hand is up first. Yes.
Okay, I work in a classroom, and the teacher in that classroom loves the iPad, and so the iPad is a huge reinforcer for a lot of the kiddos.
Yep.
But that, I'm thinking to myself, that's not really engaging back and forth. Like, what is your thought on the iPad? Like, it's something that we could control if they have to come to us to get it, but then they're kind of in their iPad
Well,
world.
how old is this child?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How old is the child?
It's an elementary school classroom, so they range from
As the
5
kids get
to-
older, there's going to be more independent play. I mean, that's just going to be part of it. As they're younger, you're going to want to definitely try to do more engagement. But any iPad games that take 2 players would be things I would look for.
Okay.
But ultimately, we don't get to pick and choose the reinforcers.
Sure.
We don't get to decide.
Right.
If a child's 18 years old and all he cares is a guy and all he cares about is Disney princesses, I'm sorry, we're going to have to use Disney princesses or else we're not going to get anywhere with them. So we use the Disney princesses, but then we start pairing that positive relationship with other things that might become reinforcing for them as well. So we don't get to pick and choose the reinforcers. We've got to live with what they've got. And if a child's interested in something that is an alone play, fine, that's okay. But we want to make sure that we're also finding other reinforcers that we can add the social aspect to.
Perfect.
Otherwise, we're not going to be sought out.
Right.
I want the child to take the iPad and bring it to me and go, look what I can do. Even if that's just dancing and cheering for every good move. You know, every time he does something, I go, oh, that's so great! I fall down and he starts laughing at me. I roll around on the floor, or I say, that was so good, I can't stop shaking. Whatever it might be, to make it social, I will. Because it's got to be social if possible, if I want to keep this going all the time. Yes?
So I'm very impressed with the progress of the kids, but I'm amazed with the progress of the parents. I mean, it seems like this is really hard to do, your procedures, and even harder to do with parents. A,
Here's-
because it's their kid, and
Yeah.
B, because they have this long history.
It can be.
And I can't imagine that within 3 training days and
Well,
some backup phone calls and so forth, pull this off.
you would be surprised. And I'll tell you why. You'll be very surprised. Because here's what's happening. Our parents are interacting with their kids every single day. And they're watching their behavior, they're watching their behavior spin out of control, and they're watching their control over the family and the environment fall away. And they don't know what to do. So they're open to doing something different, to doing something new. Now what I find is that when we teach escape extinction, traditional escape extinction, they find that much more difficult emotionally to actively be entering the child's immediate space with instructions and demands and keeping it going and everything else, versus saying, okay, well then I'll just play over here by myself without you. And then just, keeping an eye on what's going on. This is a much more relaxed way to go about it, and I find that the families, now not every family is able to do it really well, in which case then we start talking about how do we get support in there maybe 3 hours a day to come in the after school to work with them so that we limit some of the stuff with the families. But, I say we're working with 350 to 400 kids right now. If you count over the last 12 years, we've probably worked with easily well over 500 to 600 kids, and a good majority of the parents do amazingly well. You've got to, but you've got to do it piece by piece. If you go in there and expect them to do, see what I always told people when they asked about this, using parents as teachers, the question was always, well, couldn't you get so much done so much faster if you just had your behavior technicians come in and start doing it? I said, yes, but if I can teach the parents to do what a behavior technician can do, yes, the first 6 months may be slower as they slowly pick it up and learn it, but the rest of that kid's life is guaranteed to have someone who knows what the hell they're doing. As opposed to, you know, you get a good behavior technician in there, the kid's making great progress, 6 months later that person has moved on to become a supervisor, or has gotten pregnant, or has changed, and now you've got somebody else brand new coming in who knows less than the parents probably did, but no one's taken the time to actually train the parent, so the parent can't even be involved in training this new person. Our parents become like our lead trainers. Then they start bringing people in from the local environment to help. They pay them a minimal amount per hour to come in, €7-8 per hour to come in and help them out. And they're training them when we're not there. And then we're overseeing that. And I know it's not ideal. It's not, you know, BACB ideal practices, but it could be damn effective if you know, and it's been working really well. And it's cost efficient. If you look at the average cost of our families for services is about $10,000 a year. So I don't know how many of you guys are able to do $10,000 a year in services and see great progress and whip your kids through the Ables like we know you can in a good program. But that's one thing we've been able to do. So we've been getting better support from all the financial institutions because we don't have to ask for $40,000 a year or more in some cases. But again, that's a separate issue. The parent training issue is another thing. And we do know that if you look at the research, parent training, the more the parents are involved, the better the outcomes. And so, you know, why not rely on that 24 hours, 7 days a week, motivated teacher that's already there. But it's another issue. Like I said, it's not really involved with this. Did I answer your question?
I noticed that you have siblings in some of these videos. Do the parents ever ask questions about restricting access to toys for the siblings who,
yeah.
you know,
they
is
always
that...
say, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, that's up to you. But here's the deal. First, this child, we've already shown that this child's not going to be you've already seen that this child's not going to be making the type of progress he needs to catch up to his peers without some kind of supports. These are the supports that I'm recommending. Now, I know you kind of want the child to be able to play around in his room. Well, if that's the case, then have a place in your house, maybe the child's room that can be shut, where we can just shut the door and that can be locked away, but then you can still let access to it when you want. But I said, with your typical children, what's the problem with having your typical child come to you and ask for something? What I love about having everything put away in the house is that both our autistic child and the typical child need parent involvement to engage in something. So now you're in a higher communication situation where the child wants to play with something, they go over and there's a box and they're looking at the box and they can't get in. What do? Well, you know what they learn to do? Instead of figuring out how to get the toy themselves, they come to mom, they grab mom's hand, they bring mom over, and then you have your manding training and everything else that you could possibly be doing in that situation. Now, a child is done playing, sitting on the floor playing. You don't have time to teach. You're cooking. The child's sitting on the floor playing with their cars, and now they're bored with the cars, and they come to you and they want something else. They want to eat. So you can, before you give food, you can say, okay, go pick up the cars. And they're like, no, I want to eat. Okay, when you're done picking up the cars, and now we can do a weigh down on that. Then they go over by the cars, they start to pick up, then you can help them and work together and get it engaged. But it actually fosters communication. In the video I showed of Colin, he said, blow my nose. Something he's never said before in his life, but because he was in an extinction situation that he was trying to get out of, he started using language he had never used before. We know that when the extinction burst, you start seeing things that haven't been used in previous situations. So I think there's lots of benefits across the board to all of this. What do you say to a parent? You say, do you want me to help you or not? If you do, this is my recommendation. Do you think you can do it? How can we do this? Maybe we don't have to take everything out of the whole house. Maybe we can just lock things into certain areas and you try to work something out with them. But we have the benefit of being able to say to a family, you know what, if you don't want to do this, that's your choice, it's fine. We'll go on, you guys can find another program. You know, you can do something else. But if you don't do this, I don't feel like we can help you. Or this is the other option. And then we show them escape extinction and they go, okay, well, we'll do this. Almost always happens. Oh yeah, we do the same. You're right, we use it on the parents. The parents are giving us a hard time, so what do? We do this. Like, oh, wait a second. No, we do the same. That's exactly right. But that's everything I do in my life is like that. I mean, it just seems to be a better way to approach the world. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to do this outside of children with autism, so adults?
My wife uses it on me, for sure. Now, will we have some kids with Down syndrome? We don't work with a lot of adults. We've had kids, people as late as 18. I think that I have worked with people who've gone on and done some of this in home type issues. What are they called? Hospital issues where kids are living there, adult living facilities, and they've done some of it because they can't do escape extinction. The kids, are just ready to beat them up. So what they do is they just, to some degree, now you're dealing with some ethical issues as far as what can you take away from an adult? What reinforcer can you take? Like if you clean everything out of their room, that's their favorite things to do. You better make sure that they have access to it when you're not there to teach them. You can't just void them of reinforcement. And that's the other mistake some parents will make is they'll hear this and they'll go, okay, so we take everything out of there, we block everything, and then they don't have anything. And then when they don't have time to work with the kid just sits there and stimming. No, that's the wrong thing. They can play with whatever they want. It's just that you're in control of when they get it, how long they have it, and what they would do to get it and lose it. Does that help? I haven't had a lot of experience with that, to be honest with you. Yes?
I know we're almost out of time, so just a quick question. So a lot of the videos that you've shown are kids that I would, not to over-categorize kids, but I would consider to have some high-functioning repertoires. They seem pretty aware of their surroundings. One of the videos you showed this morning was the little boy in his dad's lap. I would say looked like he was, just from that brief snapshot, a little bit less having those repertoires. So can you just give a brief elaboration on success or failure rates with this type of approach with the lower functioning kids who maybe aren't as into what's going on in the
I think we are. I think we've been pretty equally successful with children who are completely nonverbal, who are very low functioning, versus higher functioning. In fact, often the higher functioning kids can be more difficult because of the language that they use tricks families into giving way too much attention where they shouldn't be. It's a lot easier to turn your back away from a child who can't talk or that you can't talk to anyway. And you start to engage and the child stamps his foot and you just teach the parent to do this. And the child comes back around them and you say, okay, what did you want again? The child stamps his foot and they do this. That's actually easier than dealing with a child who's going to be going, oh, you're such a bitch. It's a little bit different. So actually I think it's easier and often it works better with the lower functions. Here's who it has the least effectiveness with. Kids who are able to self-reinforce in their heads. Kids who can close their eyes or just lay and look out the window and who can just play scenes in their heads for hours at a time, those are the ones that are the most difficult to reach. With everyone else, especially kids who have a lot of attention function in their behavior, it can be really effective. And like I said, with the question, what you brought up before, if somebody is stimming with their hands, sometimes if we can get sticks and things, we'll have boxes of those, and that's what we use as our reinforcer. So the more, the stims aren't usually that much of a problem, because I can either make the stim more fun with me than they can have alone, or I can block the stim away from the teaching setting, making them want to come back to the teaching setting. It's the ones who really will, like if I had this one child and I said, okay, well, he's finding too much reinforcement in the environment, so we're just going to block him into this corner here. We're going to see what happens if he has no access to anything. And he literally sat there in the corner with me and my arm here, and he sat there like this. For 45 minutes. I was like, okay, I'm running out. I don't know what to do here. And so that's when we started interrupting it with verbal. That's when we started doing prompting and verbal interruptions. And then we had to start becoming the aversive. But I always would rather be the aversive in a timeout than in my teaching setting. One last video, and then we'll call it a day.
We're actually at time right now.
Oh, it's a 1-minute video. All right, here's what I'll do. I won't play the video. I'll say goodbye. But if the video happens to be playing in the background, then you guys can peek at it on your way out. Steve Ward talks about the teaching setting as the reinforcer, and that you can withhold the teaching setting as a reinforcer. Here I am engaged in teaching. That's my teaching setting there. I'm teaching with the puzzles, and I have a little backup reinforcer here with some food item. Now when I ask him for the ball, he refuses. So my first instinct is to go ahead and take the ball back. He doesn't let me take the ball back. And since I'm not going to get into a struggle with them over it, I just start picking up my teaching setting and threaten to leave. Take my reinforcers and I go. I start saying, give it back, give it back. That's turning the tables around. That's exactly what we want to do. So now I can sit down again, now we can engage, now I can reinforce him for sitting and engaging, I can get back to him. Again, a little bit later it happens. Now I'm telling him, hey, that was too slow. If you want me to stay, you got to do it faster next time. But that's the idea. How great would it be is if you could threaten to stop teaching as the reason why the child was starting teaching with you again? I'm telling you guys, we're doing that on a regular basis. Thank you all so much for your time. Again, if you don't have my email address, I'll put it up here. Send me an email and I will send you the PowerPoint. And the videos that I have on here are all on YouTube. So yeah, just email me here and I'll send you the PowerPoint, and the videos are all on YouTube as well. It's pretty much the same thing. There's only got a couple extra slides in this one. But if you tell me you want the longer one, I'll give you the longer one. Enjoy the rest of your conference, guys.
Evaluation, if we can sign your CU.